I'm starting to get a lot of questions now. You're probably getting the same thing. And I addressed it in one of my last videos, is a lot of raw lifters are asking, what's the best way to get into single ply? And I think this is a good way to kind of address that. Because what you were doing, it's kind of a, let's just say it's the same philosophy, but maybe different training methods, is what we were doing at Westside. We were using our raw training as the base to be able to develop the gear training. So the raw training would have to adjust based upon the gear. Okay, so not the other way around. You know, the other school of thought is do the gear training and then base all the accessories off that, which creates your raw training. So the gear training would dictate the raw. You see what I'm saying?
It's like the inverse.
Yes, and when you do that, you're usually, and I know that we did, you're gonna get beat a little bit on carryover on gear, because you're not gonna be the greatest technician in gear, because most of the time it's being spent raw and just enough in the gear. And if you had to bump the gear up, you had to drop the raw down. So if something goes up, something's got to go down.
Yeah, exactly.
Where vice versa, you know, when you're training to maximize the skill of using the equipment, when that goes up, a lot of times when they go to drop the raw, their lifts drop. You know, so it's very interesting, because it's a skill being thrown into a strength sport that really mixes the pot and mixes the soup up a lot.
Oh yeah.
Where the easiest thing to do is just do the gear training and leave, which is what a lot of people do, and they get hurt, and they usually carry a lot higher body fat, and they're not going to lift as efficiently.
The longevity is not even. They don't last as long either.
Yes. So there's a trick in that mix, and the advice that I had for the people who were raw looking to go into single ply is I really didn't answer the question. What I said is, because I really think this is what's going on, because raw's really only been popular for 5 years, let's say, maybe 10, really super popular 5 years, which is just about enough time for somebody halfway serious, you know, a serious gym goer to convert into powerlifting, make progress, and then hit that wall. Hit that real first, oh shit, am I at my genetic limit? How am I going to overcome this? You know, because it's usually pretty easy for the first 3-4 years. You know, maybe it's slow here and there, but boom, it pops up. When they hit that first real major, oh fuck, what am I going to do? I think that's where a lot of people are, and they're the ones that are saying, hey, look, I'm starting to think about single ply. So instead of addressing the weakness and fixing the issue, they want to put the Band-Aid on it to be able to keep getting stronger. Which I understand that. I mean, I completely understand that, but my advice was don't do it. Figure out how to overcome the sticking point and training issue now, and then once you break that, then you can start looking in the gear, because once you get in the gear, yeah, your numbers will probably go up. Sometimes they won't. Your raw is going to definitely tank, and you still are going to have the same sticking point. It's just going to be magnified. You know, it's going to be a little bit stronger, but if the sticking points that I found, and it'd be interesting to hear your input, the sticking points were always the same for my raw lifts in the gym as they were for my multi-ply lifts. For my bench, if I was weak at the bottom, it was going to show up in me not being able to touch. Okay? If I was weak at the top, it was going to show up at my lockout. It wasn't like I was weak at the top raw and never. It never was the opposite. It was always the same. If I was weak 3/4 up in the squat, it was the same raw as it was in gear. If I was weak in the bottom of the squat, I would sit down into the squat with gear and fall over. You know, it wasn't so much. Now, how it displayed was different. It wasn't like you'd see a raw lifter just come up a little bit and stop. Weak in the bottom in gear, you're falling over. I mean, you're going down. It's like, you just have this stability. And I've seen that to be true with almost every lifter. So the gear does give, you know, that pop out of the bottom like what we're talking about. But if you're weak out of the bottom raw and you go into gear, you're still going to not have that pop out of the bottom.
Yeah. What I find interesting is, like, when I look at, people call it raw versus equipped. I actually call it assisted strength and non-assisted strength.
Yes.
That's the way I like to term it. So it's just the term of how much more assistance you get. So more layers of gear, more assistance. But, you know, looking at like the conjugate standard training of Westside, which is very similar to how I train with equipment, is the way I would always answer the same thing is, all right, well, the only thing that gear is going to do is make anything that's wrong even more glaringly obvious.
Yes.
So you still got to train the gear the same way you would train raw. It's just that the accessory movements that address the weakness might be different because they're going to be done with a mode of assistance with a shirt, wraps, maybe banded theories, just to get the overloads to really get your body to handle what's about to. You got to prepare your body for what it's about to do. So obviously you have extra layers of assistance, whether it's 1 to 20. You're weak out of the hole, you're still weak out of the hole.
Yeah.
So the only thing you can do is build that up to where it's no longer a weakness. But if you're weak out of the hole, probably like banded box squats, suspended good mornings, crap like that. But those are going to be trained even heavier than they would be for the raw athlete because of the overload theory. So, you might be taking near maximums, I'm not saying near maximums, like a lot of successive doubles and triples on a wave theory, but that waving, so raw might be 35 days, 28 days, which is no more than 4 or 5 weeks. Equipped, it might be a 14-day format with a deload, and then stepping up another 3 to 5% with another the same method, just working on the assisted theory of really getting the body to hold tension. And you're almost forcing that to facilitate it because if it doesn't happen, you're not going to be strong. And then just build your raw base underneath that, like you were talking about. But yeah, so when I look at the theory of raw versus equipped, assisted versus non-assisted strength, is if you always train to be strong, you'll never go wrong.
Yes.
But if you train to only master one aspect of, for instance, powerlifting, you're only going to be great at one aspect of powerlifting and suck at everything else. And you're really just going to be wasting your time as a lifter because you're going to be reteaching things. But, because, age is a golden factor in powerlifting. And, they always say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. In some aspects, if you don't build your body the right way to sustain longevity, you're never going to get that back. So, a lot of tensional theories, a lot of volume loadings and successive patterns, yeah, you can wave them in later in life, but at some point in time, if you just neglect it for years, and there's some people I know that have done that, you try to get them to train on a concurrent system raw, which obviously is based on mastering weaknesses. You get them outside the mode of anything beyond the classical lift, they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And then it will magnify itself raw, and it will magnify itself on equipment, and they really just don't get better, even though the training should be dictating that. And a lot of that just goes through, proper preparation. But a lot of that stems from because I think, the old adage was, if I'm going to lift in gear, wear my gear all the time so I know how to handle gear. But if you totally neglect basic strength theory, at some point your body's going to break and you're going to fail.
Yeah.
But,
Part of a couple of things I want to throw in there, and with your medical background, you'll be able to help with some of this too, is you talked about the longevity as far as the volume and the loading and so forth. And something that I think a lot of people forget is, you have to look, if you're a serious lifter, right now I think we have the highest rate of lifters coming in and coming out of the sport we've ever had. It's happening at a much faster rate. Yeah, it is. It's you're seeing guys for a year and they're gone, and it's super high. And some of that could be because the sport's predominantly raw, so the cost of entry is lower. If somebody's got to invest $600 in gear, they might stick around, a couple years more, regardless of the reason it's happening. So we're going to exclude those people. They're needed in the sport by all means because it brings money into the sport. The lifters that I'm talking about are the ones that are committed. They're trying to become their best. And what I think gets overlooked with training trends, because we've been doing this for a long. I've been doing this forever. You've been doing it for a long time. This high volume, this high frequency thing. It's new now. It was new 4 years ago. It was new 4 years before that. Everything comes and goes.
change a few words and everybody has a new high volume.
Exactly. Concurrent's going to come into vogue. Linear is going to come into vogue. It all. Meanwhile, they're always all out there. It's just something bubbles to the surface and it kind of goes away. Where when you're thinking longevity, you still have to think. And Steve is a victim of this. I'm a victim of this. Eddie Cohn's a victim. Everybody's that I know is older is a victim of this. Joint wear and tear is joint wear and tear. So every repetition that you're doing is putting wear and tear on that joint over a period of time. So you have to really ask yourself, if you can get strong squatting once or twice a week, then are you going to get significantly stronger squatting 4 times a week? And if so, is it worth doubling the wear and tear? Because on the ass end of this, it could be 3 years off of the sport, because of the joint wear and tear.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because it's funny. I joke with people. They're like, "You must train heavy all the time." Like, actually, I really hate training heavy. Like, I don't like training heavy very often at all. And people might be watching, like, well, that doesn't make any sense. You've seen some of your Instagram stuff. So I guess the term is, what does heavy mean to me? And it could be dependent on the day, on the loadings. A 2-rep max is heavy for a 2-rep max, et cetera, 5, 6, 8, whatever. Earlier in the segment, we talked about preventative measures for joint and tendon wear and tear. Well, my thing is, in any sport, if you expose yourself to more continuous repetitions of whatever you're asking your body to do, you're always at risk. Like I said, it could be 2-fold, 3-fold. So if you're squatting once a week, you double the frequency, you're doubling the risk. You squat 3 times a week, tripling the risk. So the thing is, if you could train on a very low frequency but make it super efficient, where you're training strength theory as opposed to strength per repetition, which is really what that is, and that usually goes to a periodized or a linear progressive type of theory, which has been around forever, and people always try to bring it back up, saying it's and there's a reason for that, but that's like the most advantageous way to train. And for beginners, yeah, you get away with handling a lot of frequency, but you could probably still handle stuff, I would say, at a moderate frequency.
Yeah.
So instead of doing something 4 or 3 times a week, 1 to 2, depending on your training cycle, to where the frequency of the third movement, so say if you're benching twice a week, all right, well, that next week, say in the 5th week, you feel better, on a Saturday, go in there and hit some accessory movements. It could be dumbbells, it could be like incline presses, this standard strength building stuff. It doesn't actually have to be the actual competition bench press for what we're saying here. But I think when you look at from the medical background, I think in powerlifting, because it's a very point A to point B sport, you're moving something for squat and deadlift from one position to the next to its return state back in the rack. Doesn't matter if you walk it around. I don't really want to get in that, but literally you're picking something up and putting it back to the state it was at present, the return state. Same thing with the bench press. But so the thing it is because powerlifting is predicated on building maximum strength, you're always going to be stronger than a person walking down the street. If you did a base stress test, EKGs and things like that, your body will always be superior than the average person. So when I look at that, is how are you going to be stronger than the strongest person? But with that, when I see it like that, is how can you outlast that person too? So a person might be light years ahead of you when you're 22. Well, what about when they're 32? Or they're going to be around when they're 42? So sometimes when I look at like the linear progressive, and I know a lot of people have been talking about this periodization, which I'll step into that. To me, periodization is nothing more than a mode to retain strength, but not to build strength. So you can periodize a movement inside of a mesocycle, which is between 3 to 5 weeks. Sometimes it can extend to 6, and then deload. So, but if that is the primary way of training, and you get beyond the 36-month mark of the powerlifter, most likely not, your rate of return is going to diminish the better you get. So what's going to end up happening is it's not going to be that you're not getting, your muscular is getting bigger, you're getting more volume, you're getting more size, you're getting fuller, your metabolic rate might be increased, but are you actually getting stronger? Most often the strength is determined off of the rate of fatigue and exertion. So if you're handling things more often, the rate of fatigue and exertion isn't going to be in your muscle bellies. It's going to be in your insertion and insertion points, the tendon tie-ins and all that. That's the crap that's going to go first before anything else. Because muscle, it's very hard to tear muscle, I believe, unless it has to be way above its capabilities, and it's going to strain and stretch and tear from medical background. So really, you're talking about tendons and joints and ligaments, and those are the literally the structures that hold the body together. Those are going to blow. So yeah, why would you want to expose that any more than you have to immediately? I mean, I would just say stay the course, and I would say slow but steady but predictable progress over a long period of time. As long as it continues, somebody that does that for 5 years, 6 years, after they're starting, they're probably going to be they would probably be above average. There's the person that could do that, like we're saying, people are jumping in and out of sport. They usually jump in or out. Ever it's boring, they're non-competitive, or they experience the first injury and their feet are going to get hurt if they continue. And that usually stems from that.
Yeah. To circle back, because there's a lot of different training philosophy, there's a lot of different training methods that do work. When I'm talking about this high frequency, I'm talking about the people that are jumping on the high frequency bus and that's all they do. If this is structured within a multi-year plan, there's a couple blocks here and there, but then there's other blocks where it drops way down. That's a different, it's under block training. Then that's fine. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, just boom, that's all they do and they never change. It's just leading to a course of disaster. But if it's just part of a couple blocks strategically placed with other blocks that are going to bring it down, then it can have its place. I want to go back to the gear when we were speaking about that and the